Record the webinar. Okay, so we will get started. Hi, everyone. You know that I'm Nina Walden, and I'm so happy to see all of you. This is our first topic webinar of the year. The topic is Rites of Passage. We're going to hold 12 webinars this year, and they'll have helpful tips on leading the study sessions. And those of you who are participating in this webinar but are also leading teen groups know that there are also separate teen webinars held each month. So this is the first yearly webinar, so I'm going to talk a little bit about things in addition to the topic, just things for facilitators. These webinars are for anyone who's interested, and everyone's welcome, but I'm going to just talk about this a little bit. First, I'll go over our agenda. We're on Zoom, as you see. Everybody is muted right now, but if you want to ask a question, you can type in the box or in the Q&A box, which I'm right now putting up here for me. So if you have something to say, I will see it. And I'll stop along the way and ask for questions also. Just type them in. So we're going to talk about Zoom. We'll talk about the facilitators a little bit. We'll talk about the independent pieces that your participants have for social action and study and spirituality. You can see we're going to talk about the different texts. The Marcus text is by Ivan Marcus, who tells about the work of Arnold van Gennep, who coined the term rites of passage, which is what this topic is called. And that describes the rituals you enact upon reaching a new stage of life. We're going to look at it both from the Jewish point of view and from just a personal point of view. Pirkei Avot and Kohelet are the texts that talk about our stages of life, and we'll find a nice way to discuss them. Creating a New Ritual is a really interesting text about a woman who created a ritual for getting older. And then I'll cover some of the suggested activities, and we'll have Q&A. So let us start out. Oops. Let us start out by losing our share. Let us start out with talking about the facilitators. So here are some things that, as facilitators, you'll want to know. The first thing you need to do is make sure that all of your participants register. This is important because they are going to need to receive the Chai Mitzvah things, supplemental materials every month, the Chai Mitzvah newsletter, and of course the JNF tree that's planted in their honor at the end of the year. And so they need to register for that. And when they register, they'll receive a link to a short survey. So if they can, it would be great. If they complete the pre and post survey, they'll get a Starbucks gift card, and we'll be able to see how our program is working and make sure that it's going the way we'd like it to be. The next thing you need to do is order materials. That's easy to do on the website. And it's great if you collect the money from your participants and then order them all at once and have them sent to one place, because that's going to save on the shipping fee. And then you'll get them all at once. An ongoing responsibility is to help your participants with their independent projects. Encourage them to carry through with their commitments for study, social action, and independent study. And last, the group facilitator should lead the group in choosing dates for the meetings. When I did it, we just kind of at the end of each meeting said, when's it going to work for next month? Some people are more organized and they'll set them all up in the beginning of the year. If you do that, kol hakavod, I really respect you, and you're definitely more organized than I am, but it's a good thing to do. Okay, so now, are there any questions so far? Are you talking to me?
No.
Oh, okay.
I have one question. We actually joined in May. So we did 5, 6, and 7, April, May, and June, right? And we want to know, when we order the Musar materials, how to charge people since they already bought the other materials. How do we do that?
That's a good question. Well, the charge is only for the materials. You know what I'm saying? They're paying $36 to get 12 booklets sent to them. So you should just charge them the same way. Say we're going to get a new set of materials, and there it is.
But when do we do that? Because I don't want them to say, well, we bought all these materials and we didn't get to use them.
So what, you're not going to finish the others? You're going to start the year with the Musar?
That was my question too.
Oh, because you can finish your year and then start Musar when you finish the other materials.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the only thing Chai Mitzvah needs is for you to be on the monthly topic, but we made the Musar and the Standard both be framed around the same topic, so that we're doing rites of passage this month, and the Musar is wisdom and how you can learn from all different experiences in your life. So in that way, it's they're joined, and you can be part of the monthly conversation either way. So I'm going to talk about independent projects. That also goes through both Musar and Standard. Either way, Chai Mitzvah participants are reaffirming their Jewish identity, their commitment to the Jewish people through three things: study, social action, and ritual. So you can either get this personal reflection booklet, which is probably in all of the packets you've already ordered, or in the coming year, we're going to have the questions about the projects on the back of the booklet. But either way, you're going to have the same questions. You're going to do an independent study, a topic that's of interest and you'd like to know more about. Social action, each participant will commit to something for the year, and everybody will take on or deepen a ritual. Now, when my group did this, we wanted to do it together. So for our social action, we did something together that we wanted to do. We didn't each take on a separate one. You can do it however your people are doing it. And I know that, Deborah, your group's already doing it, Deborah and Maeve?
Well, Maeve and I each have our pet ones, and but this is what I would like help in, because a lot of the participants would like to, but I sense that they either don't have time or they feel overwhelmed, and it could be something very simple, even helping out in the temple, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So, some of my participants were that way also. There was one woman, though, who was very involved in JNF. So when there was an event, she brought other people to it. And that was their social action. Some people are going to do more and some people are going to do less. So I think that as long as they can reach it on their own level, like you don't have to work in a soup kitchen every day to be doing some sort of social action. You can participate in one thing your temple's doing or one thing your community is doing. And in that way, you're doing social action. The same thing with ritual and with spirituality. People come to it at all different levels. And as long as they're doing something that's meaningful to them and is bringing them to be more engaged, that's all that matters. It's like with exercise. If you think you're going to be at the gym for 2 hours every day, you're never going to exercise. But
how do we get people inspired to go out and start? Like we had one participant, so she actually said, I went over to this, I believe it was a local children's museum, and I offered my volunteer services. So she was a self-starter, but how do you get somebody started who may not know how? So
maybe invite them to do something that you're already doing. Maybe, I don't know what your social action is, but if it's something that you could invite someone to do with you, bring her with you.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be a good thing. And then, so on the back of the book, or in the personal reflection book, we relate the independent projects to the monthly topic. So this month, because it's the kind of the first topic, the question is, what choices have you made for your independent study, social action, or ritual? And then a more personal question, what inspired you to make these choices? So for this person that you might be bringing along, maybe the inspiration was you, just inviting her. So for the next topic, it's going to be tzedakah and philanthropy. And the questions will be, how has your text study about tzedakah and philanthropy informed your thoughts on your social action project? Or has your text study about tzedakah and philanthropy informed your thoughts and actions with regard to your independent projects? So the questions are related, and they're to keep people kind of like engaged. And you can you can do as little or as much as you feel comfortable. And people who are having trouble getting started, as a facilitator, you can just bring them along with you. It's not a lot of pressure. It's just something to feel comfortable. I know when I was younger, I never did anything with UJA, and then someone invited me to come with them. They got me right in there. I was hooked. So sometimes you just need a friend, to bring you along. Okay, so are there any more questions about the independent study or the social action or the ritual? I actually unmuted you all because I could, and that's easier. Okay, if you have a question, just let me know. If not, we can get started with the themes. This is a really interesting. So life cycle transformations are referred to as liminal moments because we come out of them in some way permanently changed and transformed. So when you're thinking about what a rite of passage is, it's not just like a bar mitzvah or a wedding. It's anything that permanently changes you. I mean, for a kid, it could be going to sleepaway camp. For an adult, we go through so many things. The planning and preparation leading up to these liminal moments push us to acknowledge and find meaning in the transition. So, for example, if you're going to retire, you don't just go to work one day and then the next day you're gone. Probably they're going to have a party for you. You're going to discuss it. You're going to plan it. And that's true with both Jewish and personal moments of this kind. Judaism helps us to divide our lifetime into meaningful occasions and stages. And marking our lives through life cycle events is one way Judaism works to bring order to chaotic times of change and transition. Because even if it's a happy transition, it still makes you uneasy in one way or another, because it's a change. Some people get more uneasy than others, but I think everyone feels it. Chai Mitzvah participants are reaffirming their Jewish identity and commitment to the Jewish people through, as we were saying, study, social action, and ritual. So they're also acknowledging new stages in their lives. So there's a really nice opening activity that I would love to show you. And it's nice because it gets people walking around and talking. It's a good way to start. Hang posters with different age spans written on them. 0 to 13, 14 to 26, 27 to 39, 40 to 52, 53 to 65, 66 to 78, and I would put 78 plus. The older I get, the younger 78.
So get true.
I know, it's just zipping along. Somebody I was talking to yesterday said he was 71, and I was like, oh, you're not so old. Anyway, so think about their lives both as Americans and as Jews, or just as people, and record responses to this question on the posters. What are the milestones and rites of passage that you encountered during each of these spans? And they're probably going to write bar mitzvah, wedding, birth of children. But in addition to all of those, you might want to encourage them to include American rites of passage, like a new job, retirement, moving to a new city, just all kinds of things of that sort as well. Even divorce, really. I mean, anything that's a change. And then they can discuss how the personal or American rites of passage compared to their Jewish rites. What I do is I have them write the Jewish ones in blue and the others in red, just so that you can kind of look at them and see what the different rites of passage are. And you can kind of see within the group how many of them would be considered like Jewish and how many would be considered just American. And then you can talk about what ways these rites of passage forever changed you, and how did you mark these rites of passage? And it's very interesting, and that's like a great way to get started with this source book. Any questions before I go on?
Are we able to print this out when we're done?
Not only will you be able to print it out, but I'm sorry. Not only will you be able to print it out, but I'll send you a recording of it I'll send you a PDF of the webinar,
Okay.
of the slides, and yeah, and anything else you need, I'm here. And I'll send links to other things that we're going to be talking about later, because I have some things that I think will be fun. So yeah, so you don't have to worry.
Okay.
Good. Okay. So then we're going to go into the start reading with the actual texts. Okay. So the first one is the Ivan Marcus text that we had been talking about. So we talked about how he talks about the term rites of passage being coined by this guy Arnold van Gennep in 1909. And this is what Ivan Marcus says about it. Each culture interprets the markers of different stages of life and uses gestures, including words, foods, dress, and interruptions of routines, in order to represent these ideas dramatically and thereby enable the individual going through the particular passage or transition to experience with his or her family and community this change in all of their lives. Changes in life cycle that are historically shaped in a particular culture include, and we can see these in ours as well as other cultures, rites of birth, weaning. We don't have that in Judaism, but I know in Mexican culture, if you wean a baby at age 2, you have a ceremony that means if the baby dies, you did your best. This is like from primitive culture. Initiation to adulthood, apprenticeship into study or work, marriage, birthing, parenting, becoming an elder, and finally death, and remembering a life after is no longer here and now. Each rite of passage has a 3-part structure. As a rite begins, there is a stage of separation in which the individual is removed or taken away from the group or identity in which he or she has been living up to this point. The person then is taken through some type of transition from the earlier stage of life into a new stage. This is sometimes called the liminal stage, as we were saying before. From the Latin, limen, meaning boundary. Finally, the individual goes through the 3rd stage of incorporation, during which he or she is made part and parcel of the new stage of life. The individual then goes from something old through something in between into something new. His schema explains how at each stage of development a person stops being what he or she was, travels along a path of change, and then adjusts to living a new pattern of living. The tendency to innovate rites of passage and rituals is not new to Judaism. When we look back over the course of Jewish historical experience, we see that every age has contributed to the creation of new rites of passage. So in other words, the bar mitzvah is relatively new in the timeline of Jewish history. That came from early modern Germany. The first hair cutting, there's a first hair cutting ritual. That's from 16th century Palestine. These rites and many others were invented at a specific time in a particular Jewish community, and then were either preserved locally or adopted by other Jews and disseminated so that they became widely practiced customs. This text describes the structure of a rite of passage, what is traditionally included in the reasons for it. Once you've read the text and discussed the questions at the end, draw upon what you've studied to plan a ritual to mark the culmination of your year of study. So you might think about how your group's going to culminate the experience. Think about the following items that are part of these rituals. Purpose, what are we marking? Place, should the ritual take place? Community, who should be present? The ritual and the symbols you can take from Jewish and from others, make up your own. What will we do? And a commitment, what kind of promises are we going to make? So it's kind of good if you want to start planning now, even if your culmination ceremony is going to be later, just because you're in the topic of planning rituals. Any questions? Okay, then I'll go on to the next text. This is from Pirkei Avot, and it's about rites of passage. I have to say, when I read this to my parents, and I got to the end, we had a nice laugh. It's Yehuda ben Tema used to say, at 5 years of age, study scripture. At 10, study Mishnah. At 13, you're subject to the commandments. At 15, the study of Talmud. At 18, marriage. At 20, pursuit of a livelihood. At 30, you're at the peak of mature strength, which is very depressing if you think about it, since 2 of my kids are older than that. At 40, wisdom. You have mature intellectual powers. At 50, able to give counsel. You have mature judgment of situations. At 60, old age is creeping on. At 70, you have the fullness of years. At 80, the age of strength. At 90, your body is bent. And at 100, as good as dead and gone, completely out of this world. My parents were laughing. So what we want to say about this is that this is the way it was looked at at one time. And we're going to go on and we're going to read the next one and we're going to compare. We're going to think about, are the stages of life organized like this? Which parts resonate with your view of stages of life? And are there any parts of this list that surprised you or conflict with your view of the stages of life? And what is the chaos that the rabbis are seeking to order? This is an order. They say at 5 you did this, at 10 you do this, because they're trying to bring order to the chaotic event that is life. And do you think they succeed in bringing order by doing this? And if you do, then how do they do it? Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll go on then to the next one, which is similar to the other books. Oh, first of all, a little bit about Kohelet. It's a category of literature known as the wisdom literature. It reflects on the nature of the world and God who created it and the place of humans in creation. So the following provides a different approach to dividing the stages of life. Okay. I like this one very much too. There are discussion questions in the source book that relate to each text. And then you can also use the questions you see here, which relate both Pirkei Avot and the Kohelet text. Both texts are seeking to organize the stages of life, but in different ways. The questions you see here put the text into a more personal context. So I love this. If anyone is my age, you'll remember that the Byrds sang this. If you're older than I am, you'll remember that Pete Seeger sang it. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. And if you know the Byrds version, we swear it's not too late. So it's a great song, and I'll send a link also to that because you might enjoy playing that with your group. So here, think about where you would place yourself in this Kohelet text, and where you would place yourself in the Pirkei Avot text, and which division of the stages of life, Pirkei Avot or Kohelet, do you find more personally meaningful, and why? And you might even find you want to discuss a third idea that's neither Pirkei Avot or Kohelet, but how you see yourselves as individuals within this organized way of looking at aging. So if you're going to do that, you can think about it in a very personal way. Any questions or comments? Okay. The next one, creating a new ritual, is, I can't read the whole thing because it's long, but it's really interesting. I don't know if anybody has looked at it before. It's a woman who decided that she was going to have something she called like a crone ceremony to celebrate her aging. She was turning 60, and she said she was beginning to feel the physicalness of her aging. I saw 60 a couple years ago, and I'm not feeling it yet, I'm happy to say. But anyway, she felt this was a time to mark her aging. And she took traditional symbols. She wore a kittel. And she took some Jewish rituals or symbols and put them together with some others to mark this in her life. So, and she called it Celebrating Aging. And that was an approach to creating new rituals to help bring structure, order, and meaning to the life cycle. And she used traditional symbols, and she wanted to acknowledge a stage of life that often passes without formal acknowledgement. I know a few people who'd rather not acknowledge it or formally, but it's a very, very nice and important thing to think about as you go through things in your life, that you can make a new ritual, and you can look at how we do it in Judaism, and you can use these symbols to make a meaningful ritual for something that's meaningful to you. So as you read, consider how you might want to apply her experience to creating a ritual celebration of becoming a Chai Mitzvah or anything else that's important in your life. Questions or comments on this one? This is a good point for your participants to really, take it and make it a personal thing for them. So I hope that you will do that. And those are really the texts. When you're making this ritual, think of these elements: tradition, similar rites of passage, family, community, and prayers and objects that you use, and the needs that the ritual fulfills. Okay, now we are moving on. If there are no questions or comments, we have some great supplemental resources. One of them, it's about how bar bat mitzvah is one of many coming of age rituals. And they picked 13 to include in this source. There's a Brazilian one called the bullet ant initiation, which I thought was very interesting. There's an Amish one, where they send the kids out at 16 and they stay till they want to come back. As long as it could be for 10 years. Hispanic one, the 15-year-old birthday. There's a Sweet 16. There's an Inuit one where the boys go into the wilderness and become hunters. There's a special birthday for Muslim girls when they're 11. There's a coming of age tradition in Kenya where they become warriors. There's the Ethiopian where they jump with cows. And all kinds of stuff. So it's interesting to read. And then there's one, Gail Sheehy, you probably remember she wrote the book Passages. It's very much about the same topic. This is an in-depth profile of her and an interview with her talking about her own life journey. So that's an interesting supplemental material. And then just for marking Jewish milestones and understanding them better, you can look at Ritual Well. There's traditions and innovations. Those are supplemental materials. Anybody want to comment?
I did print out what is it? 13 amazing coming of age traditions, and I find it really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's really interesting stuff in there, especially for us because bar and bat mitzvah is such a big deal in this country. It's so interesting to see other cultures and what we value, what we emphasize in our bar and bat mitzvah ceremonies, and what other cultures emphasize. It's very interesting. And that's basically what we have for here. I try to keep these nice and short. So any more questions or comments or suggestions?
We were discussing the difference between a milestone and a rite of passage, which is, they're actually two different things.
That is very intelligent.
Yeah, we were just kind of batting that around. And
could you repeat the question? I didn't hear.
Well, it was more a comment. Maeve and I were batting around the idea that the milestone and the rite of passage are two separate things. The milestone is a marker. The rite of passage is what you then transcend to at that marker, at that point. It's sort of like going down a highway where you see the mile markers to the next state, exit 142. Well, the rite of passage is driving past that. They're going through the door, and the door is the marker. And at first, I didn't realize that. It took us sort of going through this booklet and it came to us, hey, you can't use them interchangeably. And I was wondering how people thought about that.
I really like the way you described it with the highway sign and then going. That's a really good way to explain it. I love it. And it's interesting because when I think of milestone, and anybody please jump in here, I always think of like, I've succeeded in something, I've reached a milestone. Whereas the transition might not always be that I did something wonderful. It might be something that changed me or that happened to me or that I experienced, but I'm not necessarily going to get a gold watch. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And at the milestone, you haven't really changed yet. I mean, it's going through the rite of passage that's the change. Because I remember when my daughter graduated from high school 10 years ago now, and she got the diploma, and then I suddenly
that one too.
That's a microphone.
Oh,
the same thing.
But,
I had to then prove to myself I could be a successful adult, and that
won't let me go any more than that.
that's different than that piece of paper. That's the milestone.
That's very true. That's very true. And it's a good point. So it's a good thing to discuss the difference between a milestone and a trans. I think, you know, when I did this once at Cage, and people were amazing. They shared stuff that was like, for a group of people who didn't know each other before they started this discussion. In one way, it shows how amazing these Chai Mitzvah topics are. And so this one woman, it's a horrible thing. She had a daughter who was like 15 and was ill and took too much Tylenol and passed away. This is what she shared with a group of people who didn't know her. And it was very powerful. And what she came up with actually during this discussion was her daughter's birthday was coming up, and she was going to celebrate her daughter's birthday. I mean, I feel like crying even talking about it. But to me, the difference between a milestone and a transition, there's nothing milestone about what happened to her in my definition of the word milestone, you know? So maybe that, I don't know if anyone else, if a milestone has to be like a positive. I always thought it was a positive. I could be wrong.
A good thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're led to believe it's positive because we have the milestones of childhood too, you know.
Right.
They said they're ABCs, you know, that kind of.
Right, exactly. And we seem to get rewarded for milestones, you know, whereas we're not always rewarded for these chaotic transitions that we have to go through.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, it is the chaos.
it is. Even if you ever notice, like you're having a birthday party for your child, and instead of being happy, they're like standing in the corner crying because they're just overwhelmed.
Yes.
Right, when they're little, because it's a big deal. It's change. So
an expensive birthday party at a petting zoo, and your child's wandering off in another room.
I was at one, they brought a Cookie Monster, a person dressed up as Cookie Monster. Half the kids screamed because they were scared. The other half the kids screamed because the other kids were screaming. It's like total pandemonium. So, you know, it's good to know that there are ways that we can recognize this and go forward and make our transitions meaningful. And so I'm really hoping that after you guys do this, you'll share with me what your groups came up with and what's going on, because I think that would be really nice. I think it's really exciting to look at this topic and to see what kind of stuff people share.
Okay, I have a meeting the day after tomorrow with my rabbi who's going to facilitate this with me and another facilitator. We're doing 2 evening sessions and a morning session. We've had a huge response to this. So I would love to get this information ASAP. So you'll send it out soon.
I will send the follow-up email today. I always do, partially because if I don't, it could get away from me. But okay, you'll definitely get it today, at the latest tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure it'll be today.
Okay.
I'll send you links. I'll send you a PDF of the slides, and I'll send you a recording as well.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. There, my email address. And I'm looking forward to sharing more great conversations with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.